like when you buy stuff, right, from say Narciana or even the convenience store, what do you do with the waste?
So I think at Narcis there are 3 dustbins which are kept right beside. So it's if they're labeled with like either food waste, plastic, and there's paper. So if you're using like those paper cups, then I usually put them in the paper bin. And if I'm not there, if I just take the coffee, then there are individual dustbins in the classroom. So once I'm done, I just throw them there.
Okay, so now that you said that there are these individual dustbins which are technically not marked for segregation, what happens to these waste bins? Like, how does the waste get out from there?
I'm assuming it gets cleared every day, like someone clears it up and then it's brought back to be segregated, and I think it's then sorted, uh, food waste together and plastic together and paper together. I'm assuming it's the point of it is to be segregated. So.
Have you ever seen the waste segregation process at Kriya? Or do you know where this happens or where the waste ends up going in Kriya?
Not particularly, no, I've not witnessed that happen.
நீங்கள் குப்பை எப்படி எடுப்பீங்க?
குப்பை டஸ்ட்பின் அவுட் பண்ண டெய்லியும் அங்கே எடுத்துன்னு போட்டுமானா
அங்கேனா
பேக்கெல்ட்டி பக்கத்தில் இதுக்கு முன்னாடி பேக்கெல்ட்டி பக்கத்தில் எடுத்துன்னு போட்டு 4 பேர் அமுச்சு வச்சு பொறிக்கிடுவோம். தனியாக பிளாஸ்டிக் தனியாக, கப்புங்க தனியாக, பாட்டில் தனியாக, பேட்டு தனியாக, அது மாதிரி தனித்தனியாக எல்லாத்தையும் தனித்தனியாக பிரிச்சுடுவோம். பிரித்து அங்கே வச்சிட்டோம்னா அவங்க டிராக்டர் வண்டி வந்து ஏற்றிட்டு போயிடுவோம்.
ஸோ நீங்கள் இந்த 3 ஏரி டஸ்ட்பின் தனித்தனியாக இருக்குல்ல, அது டஸ்ட்பின்லேருந்து அங்கே எப்படி கொண்டு வருவீங்க? அந்த டிராக்டர்கிட்ட எப்படி கொண்டு வருவீங்க?
ட்ராலியில் எடுத்துன்னு போவோம்.
ட்ராலிலையா? ஸோ அது எப்படி நடக்கும்? அந்த மூணு பேகு எப்படி உள்ளார வச்சுட்டு ட்ராலியில் எடுத்து போவீங்க?
3 பேக்கில் ஃபுல்லாக இருக்காது, எல்லா ஏரியாவில் எடுக்கணும். மெயின் பில்டிங்கில் 3rd ஃப்ளோர் மீன்ஸ் எடுக்கணும். டெய்லியும் டீ கடையாண்டு எடுக்கணும். இதெல்லாம் மொத்தம் கொஞ்சம் கொஞ்சமாக கட்டி ட்ராலி பிடிக்கிற வரைக்கும் வச்சுப்பாங்க. கவரில் மாற்றிப்பாங்க.
ஒரே கவரில்
இல்லை, கவர் எடுத்துன்னு போவாங்க. அந்த கவருக்கு நல்லா இருந்தால் அதை போடுவாங்க, இல்லைன்னா கவர் மாற்றிட்டு அதை எடுத்துகிட்டு வேறு கவர் டஸ்ட்பின் போட்டு அதை எடுத்துருவாங்க. அது மாதிரி எடுத்துன்னு போயிட்டு வண்டி அந்த ட்ராலி பிடிக்கிற வரைக்கும் எடுத்துன்னு போவாங்க. அதுக்கப்புறம் மறுபடியும் கட்டி வச்சுட்டு மறுபடியும் வந்து எடுத்துகிட்டு போவாங்க.
ஸோ நிறைய கவர் ஒரு ட்ராலியில் ஏற்ற முடியும்.
ஒரு 3 கவர் 4 கவர் வைக்கலாம் கட்டி.
இப்போ இதுக்கு செய்கிறதுக்கு எல்லாம் ஏதாச்சும் எக்யூப்மெண்ட் கொடுப்பாங்களா? ட்ராலி கொடுக்குறாங்க,
ட்ராலி
மற்றது என்ன உங்களுக்கு கொடுப்பாங்க?
க்ளவுஸ் கொடுக்குறாங்க அங்கே யாருக்கு, மாஸ்க்.
ஸோ நீங்கள் டெய்லி க்ளவுஸு மாஸ்க்கு போட்டு செய்வீங்க?
ஆமாம், ரெஸ்ட் போனால் க்ளவுஸு மாஸ்க்கு, டாய்லெட் போனால் க்ளவுஸு மாஸ்க்கு.
ஸோ நீங்கள் குப்பை எடுக்கும்போது க்ளவுஸு நீங்கள் கண்டிப்பாக
போட்டு போகிறோம்.
ஆனால் அது நடக்குமா?
நடக்குது.
Ideally, what should happen is that obviously the biodegradable and the non-biodegradable should be separated. and they have to go through cycles of their own. So an ideal cycle would be that wet waste from the kitchen, for example, is used as locally as possible. Because wet waste is typically hard to transport. It's dripping with water. Sometimes it's partially decomposed. So you don't want to send that stuff far away. You want to make use of it as locally as possible, either as farmyard manure or as a composting pit or whatever else, but locally. Your non-biodegradable waste, again, it's important to segregate further into plastic, glass, non-plastic, but still non-biodegradable, and so on and so forth. Right? And each of these technically should enter a cycle of their own, a recycling process of their own. So we need to make the differentiation between disposal and recycling. So right now what we're doing in the Kriya campus is worrying a little bit about the segregation at disposal time, but not so much about the recycling, because once the stuff leaves our campus, we really don't know what cycles they undergo for further processing. I was told, for example, that at some time in the past, most of the wet waste from the kitchen was going to a piggery which was in Sri City limits itself. Right? So that's ideal, because the wet waste, if it's not decomposed, it's still edible for pigs. And that's a very nice closed loop actually. But I'm not quite sure what the status is now. But the plastic waste, I know for a fact it enters, or the glass waste. Maybe the glass waste goes to the proper recycling process, because glass is technically easier to recycle than anything else. You don't lose value by recycling glass. It's not upcycling or downcycling. It's just the same thing that you get. It's not very resource intensive, so it is possible to recycle glass quite efficiently. On the other hand, the single-use plastic, which constitutes the bulk of our plastic trash, I'm pretty sure enters a landfill near either in Sri City limits itself or in Tada or further up in Sundupet. I know that for a fact. Right? So that's the biggest issue over here. So to sum up, I think the disposal has been demarcated enough, or been branched enough in order to take care of different materials. But in addition to disposal, I think this time we also started worrying about what recycling process they each enter.
I guess it makes sense. I'll ask someone else to double check. They're from Swan.
There's an additional point I want to add, right? So when it comes to discretion, as in if you go to the canteen and you pick up a cup of tea from Narsimhan and you pick up a cup of green tea, right? So what does he do to give you green tea? He gives you a plastic paper cup, and then he puts hot water in it, and then he puts a green tea bag into it. Now I'm not quite sure what to do with the green tea bag after I'm done with my tea. Because I'm not quite sure whether it's plastic or whether it's vegetable waste, right? Because I know for a fact that the tea bag, whatever the sachet, is not paper. It's made of some synthetic material. It's not quite plastic, but it's a polymer of something, right? So I'm not quite sure that that's paper waste. So I'm always confused where to throw it. Similarly, if you take food waste, and it says in one of our bins says food waste, right? Now, what if you are throwing a half-eaten item? Right? You eat your cup of noodles and then you don't feel like finishing it, so there's some noodles left. Do you put the remaining noodles into the food waste and then take the cup and put it in the plastic waste? I don't think many people do that. They just dump the whole thing in whichever one they feel is appropriate. So this segregation business, I think, boils down to discretion too much, which then means that your segregating process is not likely to succeed over time, with more and more confusion. The single-use plastic is of course the easiest. That most people will throw into the right bin. But the food waste, I'm worried about a lot of cross-contamination. So there will be plastic material in the food, there will be food in the plastic material, right?
One of Kriya's sustainability pledges is to segregate the waste, but there is no talk about recycling it. Do you think that recycling is an inherent process that should be followed post segregation?
I mean, ideally, but I think we should also acknowledge that we're part of a bigger world with its own sets of processes, right? So I know for a fact that recycling waste is not possible unless done at scale. So what that means is that, let's say that I have single-use plastic which is piled up. It's no point for Kriya to set up a recycling center for that, because the cost of setting that up versus the amount of material which will actually go in is not going to match at all, right? So some things need to be done at scale. So single-use plastics have to be processed at scale. So I know for example what Singapore does is that they simply vaporize it at extremely high temperatures. They filter the particulate matter and let it go up into the sky with a lot of chimneys. So it's a very tall chimney that lets out very little smoke, dangerous smoke, because the particulates are trapped. And then the particulates, they enter into a separate process for decontamination, and then it eventually goes into a landfill. But it's done for the whole state of Singapore, which is 10 million people, right? Only then it becomes cost effective. So when you're thinking about inherent processes that should be followed post segregation, a lot of the people who do it will consider cost. And we also need to plug into that. So maybe an appropriate scale of doing it is at the level of Sri City itself, or maybe at the level of the Tada municipality, or even at the level of Tirupati district. So that's the scale that we need to start talking about more. But I can tell you that it's not feasible for Kriya to do it at a university scale. For a population of even 2,000 people, it just doesn't make sense to do it.
Okay.
So my main concern is cross-contamination. So I keep throwing garbage every other day, every day, in both the admin main building and in the faculty residence, right? And in all cases, I've seen cross-contamination. And then the worst part is, and this I think has extremely serious social consequences. I know for a fact that there is a huge team of people who actually segregate the segregated waste using their bare hands with gloves. I don't think that's very fair. So the social aspect of this is that when you and I are not careful about segregating our waste carefully, you're forcing a bunch of people to do it for you after the fact. And I don't think that's really, really fair. We should do something more about it. Any kind of program that tells people a little bit more clearly how to segregate their waste will help. I've been careless myself sometimes where I put stuff into the wrong bin and I don't know what to do afterwards. Right. So one very interesting example of this is that in the city of Tokyo, apparently, you won't find a single public dustbin. There are no dustbins in Tokyo. Right. You are expected to keep the waste that you produce with you, go home and then throw it in your own bin. So maybe we should get rid of the public bins in Korea and make sure that people throw only in a designated space after they think about what they're throwing. Right? So nice signage before, as they enter that area, saying that this is this waste, this is this waste, this is that waste, making it very, very clear. May also help. It also helps a lot in the social aspects. You don't have people carting around huge bins all the time. It's just one very, very big bin to take care of. It's another experiment worth trying.